So I went and grabbed a trailer up on the hill, put a new decking on it, put the winch on there, welded all that up, and now I'm going to go try that. So I got it home, and I know I didn't tell the whole story with the video as I should have, but I needed to get that off of that customer's lawn, out of their backyard. And it wasn't a perfect scenario. I'm way behind on a lot of stuff. The overall of what happened was I was just doing a lawn. It was smooth. It wasn't no bumps or anything. And the shaft that comes out of the wheel motor, that inch and a quarter, inch and a half piece of steel just snapped off, and the wheel came off the hub and everything. So being so far behind, I didn't have much way to do it but to grab an old trailer that was sitting up there and grab some deck boards and throw them on there and weld a receiver where I mounted I have the winch that was on a prior video that normally I put into that receiver, but once you've got it set up where it's receiver ready, you can put it into any 2-inch receiver. And so I had it on there. Boy, that winch is handy. Oh my gosh, I should have bought one of those years ago. Then I just unhitched from the trailer when I got to the guy's yard, put the trailer right under the back edge of it, right under the wheel and the steel, and then my wire for the winch connected up, and then just hit the button and had to guide it just a little bit and got it up on there. Good morning. So I'm on to this job of changing out the wheel motors, and I wanted to give a couple of tips. Here's the old wheel motor. The drive shaft snapped in half. This one was strong and didn't leak and didn't have much play on the bearings, but I don't know what happened really. I noticed there's a little void there. But anyway, I'm putting back on the other one. Now, the bottom bolts are always going to be very difficult because this box on these Super Z's packs with dirt from the inside, and you're going to have to just, don't loosen first. I'd suggest trying to tighten a smidge, and then when you get a little bit of play, keep working it back on the loosen direction a little bit more each time. All right. Then once you got maybe quarter, half-inch play, if you want, you can put the impact on there, but don't just go left. Don't just go loose. You'll run all that dirt into the thread, snap the bolt off, and you'll have a big problem. So keep going backwards and forwards, a little bit each time. Take your time. Okay, then here's another thing. Because those are always a problem, and I've snapped them off in the frame before, you're tempted to put anti-seize on when you put it back together, but the issue becomes if you're running full brake assembly and you got this mounting flange on your wheel motor that holds this backing plate for the brake assembly that holds the brake pads and the actuator arm coming out, linkage up to the front, all that stuff. So if you were to anti-seize those, there's a risk that they would vibrate loose and you cannot access it easily to keep it checked as far as tightness. I run a minimalized thing because I found that the brakes rarely work, so I'm comfortable with putting a little thread stretch on these, and that's something from experience. You don't know how to stretch threads for a lock engagement, then be careful. But you could also put a locking thing, a split lock washer there, because you got options. You can lock an engagement at the shoulder of the bolt or on the threads. If it's a situation where the threads have been a problem and you snap bolts off into a frame and then you got a bunch of machining to do, you obviously don't want to lock it on the threads. You want to lock it on the shoulder. And that's especially important when you got these nylon or these inserts into the plastic gas tanks. You never want to lock on the threads. You want to lock on the shoulder of the bolt, because the problem becomes the plastic won't hold that threaded insert when you go to take it off. Okay, now this here, once the wheel is on and everything, it's quite easy to access to make sure that those bolts stay tight. Another factor is when the hub, I use a modified hub too, so I don't use all of that. goes on, you'll end up breaking pullers and stuff trying to remove the hubs. And it's actually pretty dangerous too. So my thinking here is I'm going to anti-seize the tapered surface. Now, of course, this is just for, you know, I'm not a mechanic. Take this at your own advice or whatever. And then, because I want that hub to come off, then I'm going to, so with the anti-seize, theoretically, it should come off. But then you worry, well, you don't want a wheel coming off while you're in motion, which is actually what happened when that drive shaft smashed or snapped. So what I'm going to do here is this part I want to come apart easily once the bolt is off. But then I'm going to put Loctite, or the nut's off. Then I'm going to put Loctite on the nut itself. So I'm going to get my fixing with the threads in that case, because I've never had a problem with the removal of the nut. So anyway, that's my thinking on that. Another thing is when you go to put these wheel motors in, slide it in, okay, and then start your line set so that you can get those kind of, while you still got some play with the wheel motor, so you can get the line sets threading in properly, and then that abates any dirt getting into the end of the line or into the end of the fitting. Then start your bolts, because then you got some mechanical advantage. If those lines weren't exactly bent right for this machine, then that will kind of get the bolts started. Then I tighten up my line sets, and then I finally run in my bolts. Okay, that's the process that seems to work for me. While the pump is off, to cover the things, when you get new spindles in, a lot of times on the new spindles, they'll have these little plastic caps. And, I'm getting these 810 spindles, really smooth running. But up here on this end here, they'll have the little plastic caps. So don't ever throw those away, because they're not perfect, but for in the moment, they can keep dust out, of the ends of the wheel motor, okay? So that's another tip that might come in useful. Another tip is when you're putting together your hub wheel motor connection, make sure that your what is this? Not shear pin. It's the key, the shear key. Make sure it doesn't have any slack when you try to rotate. Make sure that it doesn't have a significant amount of slack, because if that shear key's bent, wore out, whatever, doesn't match that hub and that spindle, you'll end up with a scenario like this, where you have a wheel motor drive shaft that's useless, otherwise good, but you see how that's all wallered out? When these machines go forward and back and forward and back, they will eat parts. With the amount of mass that they're running and the amount of directional changes you're putting on a mower in its lifetime, the amount of those ending of inertia at the beginning, that's just, amazing torque forces go on in the daily use of these machines. And I don't know exactly what happened with this. I thought I seen a void on that, in that steel casting or whatever, but you got to figure these mowers I'm running are 10,000 hour plus, and that's why I focus on mass production. Now, once again, don't ever modify your machine, but if I can get back that tightened up, that dimension, and keep my tires almost touching the deck on both front and back, then that's as good as I can do. Because then it lets me do good pass route structure where I can do both directions, so I don't have artifact lines from traffic, so I can train the grass so that it doesn't just lay over in the same pattern all the time. You get into tight spaces, and people say, well, how do you use the 72? Well, I can do it quite well, actually. I can do it a lot better than I can with the 60, but deep into other stuff. So I don't want to get into that, but all in all, the John Deere worked okay. Worked great, actually, except for my tires were dragging on the boards all the way from 5 miles over and left black lines down this highway. But that wasn't nobody's fault but mine, because I'm literally decades behind in just support stuff for my business. Even if I had 5 guys working here 10 hours a day, I'd still take many years to get to a caught up point where I would be comfortable with the day-to-day. So I'm treading water, and actually it's been a busy season, so I'm facing burnout too. So I'm going to get back to it and get the other side changed out, because it's got a whole lot of play in that wheel motor. I figured change them both while I'm at it. All right, have a good day.